there everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, I Create with Color. My name is Kelli Needham and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Brighton, Colorado. I want to welcome you today. I want to share a card with you that is part of my Crazy Holiday Series cards. Today happens to be Compliment Day, and I thought what better time to make a card that you can just give to anybody who you would like to send a nice compliment to. And I thought this card really kind of fit that description based on the fact that it's not a birthday card, it's not a thank you card, it just is a very nice, you are simply wonderful, and that can pretty much go to anybody in your life. So this is the card that I'm going to share with you today. I did a little bit of a watercoloring technique on here, and as you can see there's some gold embossing on here as well. I was trying to come up with a different way to do my embossing or my watercoloring instead of just doing a black outline, and I think the gold is really pretty on there. So here are the stamp sets that we're going to be using for this card. Beautiful Moments is in the new mini catalog that's out right now, and I love this. I think it has some really pretty images in it. It has two little girls that look like they could be friends or sisters. This one kind of looks like a mom and a daughter, or an older sister and a daughter, and then this really pretty lady right here out in the field of flowers. And I just thought it was really pretty card to make, and I thought it kind of went along with my theme really well, so that's why I chose it. And the other stamps that I used to go along with it are these roses right here on the side, and that's this one here from our Bloom and Grow, which is in the regular Stampin' Up! Catalog for the year. It has some really pretty sentiments and stuff, and that's where this You Are Simply Wonderful came from. So I'm going to get those out of the way and show you the cardstock pieces that I used for my card. So our base card happens to be Daffodil Delight, and that's 8.5 by 5.5, and I'm going to score that at 4 1/4. Next I have a piece of mint Macaron cardstock, which is 5 1/4 by 4, and that's going to be our first layer on our card. Then I have a piece from the Best Dressed Designer Series paper. That is a 6 by 6 Designer Series paper that is in the mini catalog as well. And I really like this. I liked this floral print, and I really liked the colors that were on here. I think it's kind of fun sometimes to pull different color combinations out that you wouldn't normally think of. So that's where my color inspiration for this card came from, was right out of this Designer Series paper, which is one of the things I like about Stampin' Up! Is because of all of their Designer Series papers, they have a really awesome, simple way to come up with your color combinations, and all of the colors that I'm using today, with the exception of one, are actually in this designer paper, and I'll show you when I get there which one I changed up slightly. From there, I have a piece of Gorgeous Grape, and that is going to be my layer for my lady. And that is cut at 3 5/8 by 2 5/8. And then I'm using our Shimmery white cardstock, and I don't know if you can see the little shimmery speckles in there. It's kind of hard to see unless you're up close. But our Shimmery cardstock is a little bit thicker than our Whisper white cardstock, but it's not quite as thick as watercolor paper. But it works really well for watercoloring. So you can use it for lots of different things, and it just has a really pretty effect to it. Then I'm going to be using a piece of our Vellum cardstock to do the embossing of my words on, and that is cut at 4 inches by 3 1/4, 4 inches by 1 inch, and then a piece of Petal Pink that I slipped behind the words because they kind of got lost without it, and that is 3/4 of an inch by 4 inches. So those are all the cardstock pieces. I know it seems like a lot, but when you start putting it together, it goes together really quickly. So all of those things you're going to need, and then I also am using a little bit of our linen thread as my accent on my card. Once I got this all together, I just realized I didn't need a whole lot of embellishments on it, so the linen thread just kind of made it a little bit more softer. And then you're going to need a VersaMark ink pad. I'm going to be using our gold embossing powder. Now this is an older one. It's pretty much exactly the same as the ones that you'll find in the catalog now. And then ink pad wise, we're going to be using quite a few because we're going to use those to do my watercoloring. So I have Mint Macaron, Gorgeous Grape, Old Olive, Daffodil Delight, Petal Pink, and last but not least, Soft Suede. And those are all the colors I'm going to be using to do my watercoloring with. But to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our piece of shimmery white cardstock, and we're going to actually stamp and emboss that. And to do that, you're going to use your VersaMark ink. Now, VersaMark, if you haven't used it before, is a watermark ink. It's very thick, and it will stick to your stamp very well. So you want to make sure that you clean them right away once you're done stamping. So I'm just going to ink up this lady with that VersaMark, and you can see it's really shiny, and it's also very sticky ink, and it doesn't dry very quickly. So that's the nice thing about using it when you want to do embossing, heat embossing, is because the ink doesn't dry right away, you have a little bit longer of a time frame to get your embossing powder onto your cardstock and actually get that heat set. So now I'm just going to take this piece and I'm going to pour my embossing powder over it. And I like to use a coffee filter mainly because they're pretty anti-static and a lot of stuff doesn't stick to them. It's easy to get your embossing powder right back into the container. And you just simply fold it in half and pour it back in. They make all kinds of embossing trays and everything else, and I actually even have a couple of them, but I find that I grab my coffee filter before I grab one of those trays because it's just easier cleanup for me. That little bit off of my counter. Now you could go ahead and stamp your words at the same time if you wanted to get all of your stamping with your VersaMark done and out of the way. Next, what I would do is normally take my heat tool and heat set this, but I'm not going to do that on camera. I've already done that step ahead of time, so I'm just going to swap out this one here that I've covered with embossing powder with this one I've already heat set, and you can see that shininess right there. If you're unsure of how to emboss, there are all kinds of videos out there, and maybe I'll do one all about embossing coming up here pretty soon. Just kind of depends on what I have time for as to what videos you guys end up with. So, all right, now that I have my lady embossed, I've also pre-embossed my words so that, again, I didn't have to do that on camera. So I've embossed my words on the vellum. When you're stamping on the vellum with the VersaMark, you just want to be really careful that you don't, when you're putting your stamp down on top of there, you want to be careful that you don't slide it around. You want to go straight down and firm pressure and then straight back up, because vellum is kind of, I call it slimy, and you don't want your stamp to slide around on there or your words are not nice and crisp. So just a little tip there. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring in, we have these pens called aqua painters. Basically, they're a water pen. You can see in that reservoir right there that they have water inside of them. We have two different ones that have different size brush tips on them. As you can see here, this has a really short brush tip, and then this one has a lot longer of a brush tip. I like to use my shorter one for a lot of my watercoloring because I feel personally I have more control over how much water comes out. And so that's what I'm going to be using today. And then I have a paper towel off to the side over here to clean my brush on in between colors. So what I want to do is I want to start with my Daffodil Delight first, and I'm going to color in her dress. So let's get that opened up. All I've done is smushed my lid and my base of my ink pad together to get that ink onto the lid. And this is where I'm going to, I really want my brush to be damp, not soaked. I don't want it dripping. So I'm just going to put this into my lid with the color in it, and you can see it's going to add a little bit of water to the ink. And I'm just going to pick up some of that ink, and I'm just going to come in here and watercolor her dress in. Just like this. And I am taking my time to try and not get that yellow into all of those little flowers. But if you do, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, watercolors are meant to blend together, and so you may have a little bit of blending throughout this process. And one thing that I hear a lot from people with watercoloring is, how do you get it to not all turn mucky brown because it all bleeds together? And the key with watercoloring is patience. You have to have patience when you do watercoloring to kind of let these layers dry a little bit in between. And that will allow you to build up some of those layers of color and not end up having them all bleed together. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to take in a little bit of this Petal Pink. And I'm going to color in her arms. Now you could obviously change up the skin color to whatever, you know, shade that you want. You can do lighter, darker, however you want to make the skin. I'm just kind of doing this with a light color because I have someone in mind that I really want to send this to. And there's my first layer of her arms. Again, I'm going to clean off my water brush on my paper towel over here. As you can see, I'm just brushing out my aqua painter here until the brush comes out clear. Kind of like you do if you've ever used the blender pens. They're the same way. You just kind of brush off the color until your ink comes out clear. Next, I'm going to take my old olive and I'm going to come in and add some color down here to the grasses. And I'm just kind of going along the lines of where those little plants and grasses are at the bottom. And just trying to add in some color and some interest in there. Now I do want to create a little bit more of a ground, so I'm going to come back in and just kind of brush in some color here at the bottom. And I want it to be pretty light. Alright, so I've got that first layer down, just like that. Again, I'm going to clean off my brush. And now I'm going to take my soft suede and I'm going to go back up and I'm going to do her hair. And I want mine to be a very light brown, so I'm just going to pick up a little bit of that brown and I'm just going to come in and put down one light brown layer over her hair, trying not to blend into that yellow too much. All right. Now the last color that I'm going to be using on the image itself is going to be Gorgeous Grape. And because these are such small areas that we're going to be coloring, I want to make sure my brush is fairly dry. Just want it damp. And I'm going to pick up a little bit more concentrated color on that so that I can come in here and just dab each one of those little sprigs of flowers. To me, they remind me of lavender, which is why I picked the purple color as opposed to maybe a pink or something like that. But feel free to change it up to whatever suits you. Red would be really pretty. That'd be a nice bright pop of color on these. Alright, so there are my flowers. Now, with that designer series paper, the Best Dressed, the purple color that you're seeing in there is really actually Blackberry Bliss, and it's just different shades of Blackberry Bliss. And the reason that I didn't use that is I didn't want my focal point layer to be quite so dark, and I found that the lighter shades of the purple that are in here are actually, they coordinate really well with the other colors that we have. So Highland Heather would have worked really well with this. This lighter shade here kind of reminds me of the Gorgeous Grape, and then the Highland Heather is kind of in between those two colors, and then this would be the Blackberry Bliss with that dark center right there. So you can see you can change up your colors of cardstock to kind of coordinate with the designer paper. You don't have to use exactly the same colors that they list on those descriptions. If you were to pull out the Crushed Curry, it looks very similar to this darker yellow that's on here, whereas the Daffodil is the lighter color. So I could have used Crushed Curry as well if I didn't want to use such a bright yellow. So just a little tip when you're looking for your color combinations on those designer series papers, they do list the ones that they use, but you can always pull out other colors as well. All right, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back to my Daffodil Delight, and I'm going to add a little bit more detail and color throughout that. Sorry, I had to get a drink of water. It's very dry here right now in Brighton in Colorado because we haven't had much moisture and snow. And that should be changing here soon, but right now it is very, very dry. All right, so I'm coming back in and I'm just adding some yellow in and around those little pleats, those little where the wrinkles of her dress would be. Just kind of following those lines, not being too particular to follow them exactly because I really want it to look more watercolored and brush stroked and not so solid. And now I'm going to let that dry, and I'm just going to keep going around to all my different colors. I'm going to go back to her hair right now and add a little bit more in there. And what I want to do is just kind of add in some lights and darks so she looks like she's got some highlights on her hair and then some darker areas as well. Just like that. And I'm going to come back over, blend out maybe just a little bit more. There we go. Now, skin is one of those where it's a little bit harder to play with sometimes, but I do like to try and come in and add little darker areas where there may not be so much light, like underneath of the arms, maybe down by the hand, right on the edge of the clothing usually is a little bit of a shadow, and maybe where there would be a little crease like at the elbow or at that little bend in the arm. So just to give it a little bit of depth. And I'm going to go back in with my old olive again, and I'm going to kind of outline some more of those stems just to add a little bit more interest there and a little bit more depth to the watercoloring. All right, and then again, I'm going to come in just underneath of where she's at, and I'm going to add a little bit of a darker color under there, as if there's a shadow right there. Just like that. Now, I really like this as is, so you can stop right here and you can leave your image just like that. You don't necessarily have to have like a sky or a background or anything to it. On the sample that I showed you guys earlier, I did come in with my mint Macaron and I did add a little bit of a sky around her, just kind of made her stand out a little bit more. So that's entirely up to you guys if you want to have that extra color in there. But I think for this one I'm going to stop where I'm at, and I'm going to show you the difference when we get done with and without that sky added on there, because I think they both turn out really pretty. So that is all of our stamping and watercoloring that we're going to do for the focal pieces. What I'm going to do now is bring in the mint Macaron piece that's going to be our layer on the front of our card. And what I did was I took that really pretty big floral image that was in the Bloom and Grow stamp set. And I really liked the fact that it had the roses and the little sprigs of flowers. It really coordinated well with the designer series paper that I chose. So what I'm going to do is take my mint Macaron and I'm going to ink it up. I like to do it upside down in this case, where you're putting the ink pad to the stamp, because it's a much larger image. And I want to make sure I get that really well inked up. And then I'm going to turn it so that all those little sprigs and stuff go towards the inside of my card. And I'm just going to stamp that in a border across there. Oops, I have some kind of a little fuzzy stuck to my stamp. Oh well. Alright, and then I'm going to ink that up a second time. There's that fuzzy thing. Let's get that off of there. Alright, and then I'm just going to line that up over here on the side so that the little sprigs kind of line up together, and I can finish off that border on the end. And then I'm going to do that on the other side as well. So I'm finishing off my, creating that little bit of a border right there. And it's not going to line up perfectly. You're going to have spaces in there, but when you put it all together, it'll all work. It's going to look great. Then for the inside, I took a piece of Whisper White, which I forgot to mention earlier. It's cut at 4.5 by 5.25, or sorry, 5.25 by 4 to layer inside the card. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to ink that up. I'm not sure I got it all. I'm going to ink up that same border, and then I'm going to stamp it again along the edge of my cardstock. Just like this. Again, let's ink up that other side. Just like that. So now that piece is going to go on the inside of our card, and I'll show you that when we get there. And that is officially all of the stamping that we need to do for this. From here, it's just a matter of putting it all together. So I'm going to bring in my Daffodil Delight cardstock, and I forgot to score this with my paper trimmer, so I'm just going to use my bone folder. And all you do with the bone folder is you line up your card edges together, and then you take your bone folder and you just press down on your cardstock and you drag that bone folder across to make a nice crease in there. And as you can see, I have a nice crease in my card now, and that just kind of helps burnish that edge so that your card will fold better. And I'm going to be using my Tombow adhesive. You can use snail, glue stick, whatever you have. And I'm going to layer this piece onto my card first. And I want to put these flowers towards the opening of my card. Just like that. Alright, from there, the next piece is going to be our designer paper. You can lay it down and decide which colors you want out towards the edge that are going to show up the most. This one happens to have a lot of the purple colors in it, so I'm going to put those kind of towards the inside just a little bit more, so I bring out some of these other colors that are in the designer paper so that it kind of all works well together. And in case you haven't noticed by watching a video or two of mine, I very much like color. I'm not big on monochromatic cards. That's a challenge for me. Every now and then I will try to challenge myself and do something along those lines, but I really like to have cards that have lots of color in them. That's just me. That's kind of why I create with color as my name for my YouTube channel, because I'm very, very much into colors and I love all kinds of colors. Alright, so we're going to layer our focal image onto that gorgeous grape piece of cardstock right there. And from there, what I want to do before I put any type of adhesive on the back of here is I want to use that linen thread, which I went ahead and cut myself a piece. This piece is about 24 inches. And I'm just going to take that and wrap that around my card right here at the bottom 2 or 3 times. And I'm going to tie myself a bow in the middle. I know a lot of people don't like to tie bows. When I'm working with this linen thread though, my trick is I tie this so that it ties a knot and keeps those pieces that are wrapped around nice and tight. And that way I can rearrange and move them wherever I want. And now I don't have something that's coming unraveled when I'm trying to tie my bow. From there, I'm just going to make my little loops and finish tying off that little bow. And I'm not worrying too much about exactly where it falls, other than I am going to kind of twist it and pull it and rearrange it so that it does go towards the bottom. And then you can trim off any extra that you have. And now that piece is ready. That's all the embellishment that I'm going to add to this. I didn't feel like it needed a whole lot when I got done laying it all out, so that's it for me. Feel free to add rhinestones, pearls, anything that you think might, dress it up if you want to dress it up a little bit more. And then I'm just going to add my dimensionals on here. And I don't like saggy card parts. Who likes saggy parts, right? So I'm going to add quite a few dimensionals in there to make sure that that piece really stays up and holds up through the mail. And we can go ahead and attach this to the card. These are my least favorite things, by the way. I love the dimensionals. I hate having to peel all the little backs off of them, because sometimes they don't like to come off. All right, I'm going to center this right at the top of my card, pretty close to the top. Stick that down. Now the last part that's left is our sentiment, and I want to show you what this looks like when I don't put that layer of cardstock under there. As you can see, now I have my words on there, and they do look really pretty, but the problem is I feel like they just kind of get lost a little bit. Because there's, you know, so many different floral things going on, I feel like this part gets lost. So I just stuck this underneath there as just a way to kind of highlight those words. And what I did is I just used my Tombow adhesive and I went right behind the word wonderful. And that's as much adhesive as I put on there. When I layer that on top of the Petal Pink, it just kind of highlights those words. And because the Tombow adhesive works really well under the vellum like that, you don't really notice that there's adhesive under there, especially if you go across the full length. Now, if you would have taken the tape runner and just did little sections, it's a lot more noticeable. So I encourage you to go the full length of whatever you're putting it behind. And I'm going to trim this off because I notice it's just a little bit too long. Then from there, you can just use your adhesive and put a strip across there and just adhere it right to your card. Center that on there like that. And now I am finished with my final product. So let me bring in both samples and I'll show you the difference. So this one here has that extra watercoloring on it and this one does not. And I think they both look really pretty. It just kind of is personal preference as to what you like. So thank you for stopping by and watching my video today. Please don't forget that celebration is going on right now. If you spend $50 from the annual catalog and the mini catalog, you can earn a free celebration product. We do have products that are earned at a $50 purchase and products that can be earned for a $100 purchase. So please check that out in the celebration brochure. If you have any questions, please leave me comments at the bottom, and I will list all of the products and measurements in the description as usual. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.